It was one of those evenings when emotions seemed to simmer just below the surface. We had all gathered in the living room, a family trying to enjoy a quiet night together. But quiet nights were rare in our home these days. The atmosphere had grown tense as arguments had become a frequent visitor in our daily lives. My 15-year-old daughter, Emily, was a whirlwind of adolescent rebellion. She had grown into a teenager who was convinced she knew it all. And as parents, we often found ourselves on the receiving end of her ungrateful words. As the evening progressed, the inevitable happened. A simple family conversation somehow spiraled into a heated disagreement. I could see the frustration in her eyes as she expressed her desire for more independence. She felt like we were hovering over her every move, stifling her growth. We, on the other hand, saw it as concern and protection. I couldn't help but think about the sacrifices we had made, the love we had poured into raising her, and yet here we were, unable to bridge this ever-widening emotional gap. As we exchanged harsh words, I couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be a way to reconnect, to mend the frayed bonds that had once defined our family. One sunny afternoon, while Emily was at school and I was in my office working, that's when my phone rang, and I saw my husband's name on the screen. I answered, and his voice was a mix of frustration and concern. He explained, "Honey, you won't believe what happened today." There was a knock on our front door, and I opened it to find a woman standing there. She introduced herself as Emily's birth mom. I felt my heart skip a beat. This was the last thing I had expected. Our family had been through so much, and now, out of nowhere, Emily's birth mom was here. He continued, "She said she's been watching from a distance, and she believes it's time for her to be in Emily's life. She's not taking no for an answer, and she wants to meet Emily." I felt a mixture of shock, fear, and anger. Emily was only 15, and the relationship we had with her birth mom was complicated, to say the least. I knew that bringing her into Emily's life would be no small task. After the initial shock of Emily's birth mom showing up unannounced, we decided it was time to tell Emily about the situation. She already knew that she was adopted. However, it was a conversation that required careful handling, and it weighed heavily on our minds. We knew that Emily had a right to know, even if she was, in her own way, pushing us away. One evening after dinner, we sat her down and told her about the unexpected visitor. The look on her face was a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and apprehension. She agreed to meet her birth mom, and we arranged for the meeting to take place at our home. The day of the meeting arrived, and Emily was visibly nervous. Her birth mom arrived with a quiet determination and an air of self-righteousness about her. As they sat down and started talking, I watched from a distance, trying to gauge their interaction. As the conversation unfolded, it was evident that Linda was agreeing with everything Emily was saying, trying to be more of a buddy than a parent. She acted young and carefree, attempting to speak in a way that mirrored Emily's conversational style. I knew what she was up to. After Linda left, Emily thought Linda was wonderful. We tried to negotiate, suggesting that she could be a part of Emily's life, but wait until Emily turned 18 years old, instead of the original plan for her to be part of her life at 21. Emily's response was a storm of emotions. She cried, told us she hated us, and it seemed as if the rift between us had grown even wider. In the end, we relented, allowing Linda to visit Emily occasionally, trying to find a middle ground and hoping to bridge the gap that had formed within our family. Emily's visits with her birth mom became more frequent, and their relationship grew stronger with each passing day. Emily began to feel understood and appreciated in ways that we, as her parents, had struggled to provide. She confided in her birth mom, sharing her thoughts and fears, and it became clear that Emily saw her birth mom as someone who truly got her. This change in dynamics, while positive for Emily, created an emotional rift in our family. It became the source of a heated argument between my husband and I. We couldn't help but feel threatened by the bond forming between Emily and her birth mom. We questioned our roles as parents and wondered if we had failed to understand our daughter's needs. One weekend, Emily expressed her desire to spend more time with Linda. She wanted to stay over at her place. As parents, we had reservations about allowing Emily to spend the night at Linda's home. We discussed the idea at length, contemplating whether to put our foot down and refuse her request. However, as we saw the anticipation in Emily's eyes and the genuine happiness that this visit with Linda brought her, we realized that stopping her would come at a heavy emotional cost. It would likely lead to more arguments, tears, and ultimately, an even more strained relationship. So in the end, we decided to allow her to stay the night at Linda's. It was a difficult decision, one that was made with heavy hearts, but also a realization that sometimes, allowing a measure of freedom and trust was essential for her growth. Emily's excitement was palpable as she packed her bag for the weekend. We were nervous, unsure of what to expect from this new development. When Emily returned home after the weekend with Linda, her face was lit up with a newfound sense of freedom and joy. She described her time with her birth mom as wonderful. The tales of her weekend were filled with adventures and experiences that had been denied in our home. Linda had given Emily the autonomy to go out with her friends, with no strict curfew or time constraints. She even allowed Emily to have half a glass of wine with dinner, something we'd never permitted. Emily praised Linda's openness, her willingness to treat her not as a child, but as a young adult with growing independence. This change created a dilemma for us as her parents. We wanted to support Emily's growth and independence, but we were also deeply concerned about her safety and well-being. The argument that followed was intense, centering on our differing parenting styles and the fear that we were losing our daughter to someone who, in our eyes, was too permissive. Emily was now determined to live with Linda, and she made her point loud and clear. In the end, she felt that Linda understood her better, that her world was now more exciting and filled with opportunities. We tried to make her understand the complexities of the situation, the legal aspects, and the fact that Linda had signed the adoption papers years ago. But Emily's decision was resolute. She ran away from home, and it left us in tears, heartbroken that it had come to this. With no other recourse, we had no option but to call the police to bring her back, as we were her legal guardians. The police arrived at our doorstep, accompanied by Emily, who was visibly angry and in tears. They explained to Emily that legally she needed to live with her parents as we held the official adoption papers. Linda, her biological mother, had no rights, but when you come of age you can live with whoever you want. Emily yelled out, "I hate them. I want to live with my real mother." The arguments and tears that followed were heart-wrenching. But the night was far from over. Linda, fueled by a potent mix of frustration and alcohol, began banging on our doors at all hours. Her demands to see Emily grew more desperate, and the situation became increasingly unsettling. The police, now well acquainted with our family's turmoil, returned to handle Linda's actions. They took her into custody for the night, seeking to prevent further disruptions and protect our family from her erratic behavior. Amid the turmoil of those trying days, there came a knock on the door. We opened it to find a woman standing there. She introduced herself as Linda's sister and asked if she could come in. We were very skeptical, but we all sat together to hear what she had to say. She began to speak with a sense of wisdom and sincerity. "Linda has been warned not to approach Emily until she is 21 years old," she said, her voice carrying a weight of experience. "I need to make sure you understand why. Linda, through her whole life, has been struggling with drug addiction and alcoholism." She looked directly at Emily. "You would have had a terrible upbringing if you had grown up with her. You would have been left to look after yourself at a very young age because your mother would have been too drunk to care for you." Before Emily was able to speak, Linda's sister continued, "Emily, you are very lucky to have parents who love you and care for you. You have a stable and loving home, and that's something Linda and I never had." She went on to explain that she and Linda had been raised by a single mother who was also plagued by addiction and instability. Their childhood had been a nightmare, filled with drugs, alcohol, and the constant comings and goings of questionable characters. She looked at Emily with a mixture of sadness and hope. "I wish we had parents like yours," she said with a heavy sigh. "You have a chance for a better life, and I hope you realize how fortunate you are." For Emily, it was a revelation. Her perspective began to shift as she absorbed the stories of her mother, Linda, and her aunt. The night was long and emotional, but it ended with a sense of understanding and empathy that had been missing from our family for so long. In the wake of Linda's sister's visit and her heartfelt revelations, a profound shift occurred in Emily's perspective on life. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing the stark contrast between the world she had wished for and the reality of her family's history. The stories of her mother, Linda, and her aunt had left an indelible mark on Emily. She realized the grim realities that had plagued her family for generations: the struggle with addiction, the instability, and the absence of a loving and stable home. Emily began to see her own life in a new light. She understood that, despite the arguments and conflicts, she had parents who loved her deeply and were committed to her well-being. Her family, flawed as it was, provided a safe and nurturing environment. With this new perspective, Emily started to appreciate the sacrifices her parents had made and the unconditional love they had shown her. She saw her own life as an opportunity for something different, a chance to break the cycle of addiction and instability that had plagued her family for so long. As days turned into weeks, Emily's rebellious spirit began to mellow. She spent more time at home, reconnecting with her parents and rebuilding the bonds that had been strained by recent events. She realized that she had a chance to shape her future in a way that her family history had never allowed. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.